And as I mentioned before, today we have an excellent and amazing presenter. Don't forget to follow us in our website. Remember that if you have any questions, if you need any information about our webinars, you can feel free to contact us through our website or through our Instagram account, or you can register as a member of ECUATESOL if you haven't registered before. And we have the WhatsApp group as well that you can follow us and you can be part of. We are promoting and sending information about professional development, about job opportunities, and these webinars through our social media and interactive with teachers. Remember that if you have any questions, you can always feel free to contact us through our email as well. That is equatesol@gmail.com. And you can ask any questions. No, I have some information for teachers that have contacted me and saying that when they are going to receive the certificates for these webinars. No, so we are in the webinar series #1, which lasts from January to June of 2025. So at the end of June, we are going to be sending the certificates according to the number of hours and number of webinars that you have attended. So don't forget, at the end of the webinar, I am going to be sending the link for you to register your attendance. That's extremely important if you want to receive a certificate. No, so please be attending the webinar, and then at the end, maybe 15 or 20 minutes at the end of the webinar, I'll be sending the link where you have to complete the information of your registration. So, not taking more time to our amazing presenter, today we have Rosa Ruiz. She is an English professor from United University. I have the privilege and the honor that I have talked to her before. We were last year in a conference organized by United University, and today she's gonna be presenting about teaching grammar communicatively, practical activities for effective EFL instruction. We know as a teacher, grammar is always difficult to teach, no? And sometimes it's the most difficult part that the students approach in the language, no? So she's gonna be helping us today with practical activities to implement in the class. So I will give the word to Kathy. She's gonna give the introduction about Rosita, giving about all her experience that she has, and then we will continue with the webinar. So thank you very much again for attending, and I will see you soon. Please don't forget to interact through the chat box or open your microphone if you have any questions. We will be answering all your questions. So Kathy, all yours.
Thank you, Daniel Casco. It is my pleasure and honor to be here at ECUATESOL. Welcome to the webinar. Today we have our special guest, Rosa Ruiz Quizhpe. She is going to present the Teaching Grammar Communicatively Practical Activities for Effective EFL Instruction. Rosa Yanela Ruiz Quizhpe holds a bachelor's degree in education with a specialization in English from Universidad Técnica Particular de Loja. She also holds a master's degree in pedagogical of national and foreign languages from Universidad Casa Grande, as well as master's degree in teaching English as a second language from Universidad San Francisco de Quito. She is currently a doctoral candidate in education and innovation with 17 years of teaching experience. She has worked in language schools, high schools, and universities. Since 2021, she has been a faculty member at Universidad Nacional de Educación, UNAE, focusing on training future English teachers and contributing to educational research. Welcome, Rosie.
Thank you, dear Kathy, and thank you, dear Daniel, for such a warm introduction. Let me share my screen. Give me 1 minute, please. I'm going to start my presentation. All right, can you confirm if you are able to see my screen? Great, thank you so much. All right, Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with such a dedicated group of English teachers. Thank you for being in this webinar, Practical Activities for Effective EFL Instruction. My name is Rosa Ruiz. I am an English teacher, and like many of you, I've stood in front of a class of learners wondering, how do I make grammar feel less like a dentist appointment? You know, painful, boring, and something everyone wants to skip. I don't know if this has happened to you. So I'm going to ask you some questions. Have you ever taught the present perfect and felt your students perfectly forgot it a week later? Or you introduce the third conditional to your students, then you ask a question and you receive complete silence from them. Does it sound familiar to you? Yes, right? This is something that we all have gone through as English teachers. Sometimes teaching grammar has become a nightmare for all of us. All right, so today's session is about turning those grammar-heavy lessons into dynamic communicative learning moments. By the end of this lesson, by the end of this workshop, my objective is to give you some practical activities for you to teach grammar, and to teach grammar as a tool for real communication, not just rules for students to memorize. So once again, thank you for being here. Remember that this isn't just a webinar, it's a working session. So if you have a notebook or and a pencil, please grab them, turn on your camera if you can, and get ready to explore and learn together. So I would like to start by asking you two questions. For this, I prepared a poll. So you can scan the QR code that is on the screen, or you can go to menti.com and then enter the code that appears in light blue. I'm also going to send a link for you to go directly to the poll, okay? Right? Let me share my screen again. All right, so for those who cannot access the QR code, then just you can click the link and this will take you directly to the poll. Okay, for all of you who are on Mentimeter, you will find two questions, okay? You'll just need to choose the option that best matches your experience.
I think that the first question, Rosie, didn't appear when you click on.
Oh, that's why I don't have any answer.
Exactly. Yeah, I couldn't see. I just saw the first, so I don't know if you can put the first question so we can answer as well.
All right, let me go back. Can you see it now or not? All right, so we are getting answers now. Great, that's great. Okay, so let's analyze some of the responses. The first response is, I love it. It's one of my strengths. Okay, two teachers believe teaching grammar is their strength. Three teachers say, I'm okay with it, but it could be more fun. Okay. Two teachers say they feel unsure or stuck at sometimes. And finally, we have one teacher that usually tries to avoid it. Okay. And let's analyze the second question, which is about the approach that we are currently using for teaching grammar. Okay, so we have rules, all right? So the traditional method, right? Teaching students the rules and then giving them a worksheet to complete. Then we have I mix rules with some speaking activities. Great. We have, I focus on using grammar in real communication. Perfect. And finally, we have 5 teachers that adapt the grammar lesson depending on students. Great. Thank you for your responses. Let's go back to the presentation. Okay, so thank you for sharing your answers. They really matter to all of us. Why do I ask these questions to you? Because our feelings about grammar and how we currently teach it shape everything we do in the classroom. Since the very first moment when we start planning our classes till the moment we deliver our lesson. So some of us, as we could see, might feel confident and experienced when teaching grammar, while others are still exploring what works best. And that's completely normal. I believe that as teachers, we always have the chance and the choice as well to grow and make our teaching better every single day. So spaces like this one are part of this journey. Webinars like today's might leave us with a new idea, a fresh strategy, or even just a small shift in how we are delivering our grammar lessons. And that's exactly what I hope this session brings you today. Okay, so I have a question for you, and you can write your thoughts in the chat box. What do you think about this? Do you think we really need to teach grammar, or do you think it's not necessary? What do you think? I'm going to give you some time for you to write your thoughts in the chat box. You can simply type yes or no. Okay, we have one answer from Daniel. He says yes, in context. Heidi says we need to find a funny way. Great. All right, we're getting more answers. We have to teach grammar in context. Yes. Grammar is boring, but it's necessary. Yes. I do. Students can communicate appropriately. Okay. All right. Catherine says it's part of the teaching process. Great. Okay, so most of you agree on the fact that we really have to teach grammar, right? It's part of our job. So even though we believe that we have to teach grammar, you know, as teachers we have this belief, but there are some people, there are even some studies that suggest that grammar doesn't have to be taught explicitly. One of these examples is Krashen's input hypothesis. I don't know if you know this hypothesis. Well, in his input hypothesis, he suggests that grammar doesn't need to be taught explicitly. He believed that language can be acquired naturally through comprehensible input. This means that if learners understand what they hear or what they read, and they stay engaged with the language, they will pick up grammar rules on their own without being taught grammar. All right? However, there are some studies that show that grammar instruction does help improve accuracy. So one example of this is the Canadian immersion studies. This was a project. This was an immersion project in which English-speaking students were fully immersed in French. They received English classes, they interacted in English classes, teachers didn't focus on accuracy. That means that students were not corrected when they made mistakes. They were just encouraged to use the language in many ways as possible. So they, with this, they received tons of input, a lot of input. As I said, minimal correction and free experimentation. So students were not afraid of making mistakes at all. And what were the results? At the end, after this full immersion program, they could find out that students obtained great comprehension. However, students had made a lot of grammar errors. The structure of the sentences that they built was very simple, and also that students acquired limited vocabulary, right? So what can we learn from this experience? That, yeah, input helps. We agree with that, right? Input is important for our students, but it is not enough. We need explicit grammar teaching to support their speaking and writing, especially if our purpose is to have our students use it correctly in the production tasks, okay? So if we teach grammar explicitly, we have learners that develop more accurate and richer language. Okay, we have some messages in the chat box. Sylvia says teaching grammar remains essential, but how we teach matters. Yes, just as much as whether we teach it. Thank you for sharing that. And Carlos says grammar can be taught as a fragment, but does not have to take long. Okay, great. Thank you for those insights. All right, so apart from that, apart from what we have been discussing about, we have here real-world reasons to teach grammar. We as teachers know that most of the course books that we cover are built around grammar. That is to say that in all the units, all the books have a specific grammar structure that we have to teach, right? So we cannot deny that, and we cannot skip that because most of the time it's part of the syllabus. Second, students expect it, especially adults. They need to know the grammar rules to understand. Sometimes when we are teaching grammar and we teach them the rules, our students ask, but teacher, why? Why is this correct? Why is this incorrect, right? So they need to know why, they need to know the rules, the structure, the forms, right? Also knowing the system or knowing the grammar rules builds confidence in students. And finally, it supports better sentence building and understanding. So the real question isn't whether we should teach grammar, but is how we teach it and how to make it truly communicative. Because from what we have said before, after we teach a grammar structure, after we deliver content, it happens that our students don't remember the grammar structure the next day. Or even worse, when we ask students to use the grammar in context, or when we ask students a question using that grammar structure that we just taught, our students don't know how to answer. Our students do not know how to formulate a correct sentence. All right, so being that said, and the core of this webinar is to incorporate communicative activities into our grammar lessons, right? So in order for us to do this, it's important to start with this very important concept, which is CLT. All right, so I'd like to know if you guys know what CLT stands for or what CLT refers to. Can you write your answers in the chat box, please? Okay, so we have some answers in the chat box. Thank you. All right, so CLT stands for Communicative Language Teaching, right? So CLT isn't new to most of us, but before diving in, it's good to reflect what is communicative teaching, really? And how would you define it in a sentence, right? Think about that. You don't need to write down the answer in the chat box. Just think to yourself, what is communicative teaching? What is communicative language teaching? Okay, so communicative language teaching has been the dominant approach in English teaching since the 1980s. Okay, it's used by most education systems in ELT publisher. Actually, most of the books that have been updated have used this approach. Okay, so we might be familiar with this. All right. So this approach emerged as an alternative for the grammar translation method that we used to use before, right? If we are more than 40 years old, we might remember that in the past, we were taught grammar through this method, right? Translating sentence by sentence, right? And also memorizing rules and also completing exercises or worksheets such as gap fills, right? So, well, this what happened with this method? So why we moved from grammar translation method to communicative language teaching? Well, there were some studies that discovered that grammar translation methods were good for passing exams, right? But they were not so great for real communication. So students were able to complete a worksheet, but they were not able to use this grammar structure in real life, okay? So CLT is about meaningful interaction in the target language. This is a definition that we have by Larsen Freeman, 2000. Learners use the target language a great deal through communicative activities such as language games, role play, and problem-solving tasks. So this approach has emphasis on speaking and interaction. It has meaningful tasks with real purpose. And of course, writing and other skills are included as well. So what does CLT mean for grammar? When we talk about teaching grammar communicatively or including communicative language teaching into our grammar lessons, we are not saying that we are leaving grammar out. So grammar is not out of our lesson, but the way that we teach, the way that we address this specific grammar structure changes. So there's no more isolated rule memorization. We don't focus on forms. When we say forms, we refer to the structure. For example, the simple present structure, subject, verb, complement. So we don't memorize the rules, but instead we focus on form, okay? So I want to clarify this. Forms, again, refers to the grammar structure, all right? What are the elements or the grammar formula that students need to apply so they make accurate sentences? So instead, grammar is taught to support communication. There is a purpose, a real purpose for communication. So we focus on form rather than forms. Okay, so what is the takeaway of this, of everything that I have said? That grammar isn't the goal, but communication is. So we teach grammar so learners can understand, express, and interact. We don't teach grammar just for students to memorize the rules and know them by heart, but instead to use them to express themselves and interact in the target language. Okay, so why do you think some grammar lessons don't work? We all have taught grammar lessons, right? And sometimes we have had this feeling of, I should have done this, or maybe this didn't work, or my students did not participate, or maybe my students didn't get it at all, right? So type your thoughts. Why do you think this happens? Type your thoughts in the chat, please. Okay, we're getting some answers. Students get bored. Tiffany says students do not really understand when to use a structure within communication. All right. Sometimes we have complicated structure. Yes. Okay, students don't remember the structures. It takes too much time and students don't like grammar. Yeah. Not all grammar topics are used in real life situations. Okay. Thank you for sharing your answers. All right. Do you think it has to be with planning? The way that we address the topic, the way that we deliver the topic? Okay, Sylvia says, because sometimes the grammar lessons are too abstract, they lack context, and don't connect to real communication. Okay, thank you. Yes, so what I'm trying to propose today is the CAMP framework, okay? So this is a framework that I picked up from a course that I took some years ago. And I've been using this framework to deliver my grammar lessons. And this is what I want to share with you today. So let's analyze what this term refers to. C stands for context, okay? What do you think A stands for? What do you think A stands for? What does it refer to? Okay, Tiffany says accuracy. All right. We don't have more answers. You're very shy today. Okay. Thank you, Tiffany, for your answer. Analysis. Okay. Remember that we don't have right or wrong answers, okay? You're sharing what your prior knowledge on this, so it's perfect. Thank you for participating. The idea is that we make this interactive and not just a speech. All right. Thank you. So A stands for ask, don't tell. And I'm going to explain to you what this refers to in a minute. Okay, and then we have MP. MP. What do you think MP refers to? MP. Okay, we have motivate, manifestation. All right, so those two letters are connected, okay? Okay, we have modeling practice. Yes, you got one, practice. Practice is correct, yes. But M stands for meaningful, okay? And it's connected to the last one, which is practice, all right? So the framework I'm proposing today is this one, CAMP. Context, ask, don't tell, meaningful practice, okay? So remember those terms for our next, for the rest of the presentation. So what happens when we do not give students the first element, which is context, okay? We make the first mistake. I think we all have been through this. I am also one of those teachers who has started lessons like this, yeah? So we start our lesson by saying, good morning, dear students, good afternoon. Today we're going to learn the simple present. Okay, raise your hand if you have done this. Yes, we have done that, right? We have done that, right? Okay, so what's the problem here? We start directly with the grammar topic, but we are not giving students the context. What happens? Students get bored because as you have said before, most of them think that grammar is boring. When we mention this word, when we say we're going to learn grammar today, they are like, right? So there's no context, there's no purpose, and there's no interest for them. So our goal should be for our students to use the simple present tense to, in this case, to describe their daily routine. Let's suppose for this specific, for today's webinar, I chose the simple present tense to give you practical examples on how to avoid these mistakes, sorry, and how to work with the CAMP framework, okay? So what can we do instead of starting the lesson like this? We can start our lesson with a real story, situation, or need, right? We can show how grammar helps communicate that meaning. So instead of telling them today we're going to learn the simple present, we can give them the context. What do we use the simple present for? All right, so I'm going to give you a practical example later. So what is the importance of context? Context is essential in grammar because it helps the students understand meaning and use, not just the form. When I say the form, again, I'm referring to the rules. So we want the students to understand the meaning. What am I saying with this? What am I saying when I say I wake up at 6 every day? And also use. What do I use this structure for? What do I want to communicate with this? Okay? Because sometimes they learn the grammar, right? But they don't know when to use it, when to use the present simple. And then when we start teaching, when we teach other structures such as past, simple past or past perfect, students keep using the simple present because they don't know exactly what to use it for, okay? So it also helps them to see how grammar works in real life situations. And it also helps them to stay engaged and remember what they learn. Okay, so how do we present context? We can present context with situations or images. We can find pictures that illustrate the grammar structure that we're going to teach. Live listening, we can tell students a short story to model a natural language, or we can also find an extract or a video on the internet in which people are having a conversation using that specific, the target language, for example, the simple present, or we can also use texts, right? Short reading passages in which students can find that target structure in that passage, okay? So these are the 3 different ways that we can present context, give context to them. So on the left, I'm going to show you how we traditionally introduce grammar, and on the right, we have how we can do it by giving students the context, which is the first step of the framework that I presented before. So instead of saying, today we're going to learn the simple present, first we'll review the rules, then we'll do an exercise, okay? Instead of saying that, we can switch to this. Starting the lesson by asking students a question that will be also part of the warm-up to elicit students' prior knowledge. We can start the class or the lesson by asking them, do you have a routine, right? And then we can start by telling the students a story. As I said before, we can read a story for them. So in this case, I can start my lesson by saying, let me tell you about my daily routine and my husband's daily routine, okay? As I tell you, listen for patterns and what verbs do I use? We can ask the students to write down what sentences, the sentences that they heard, also the verbs, complete structures, or whatever they can get from the story that I am reading for them, all right? We can also complement this with some pictures. For example, we can show them some pictures. In this case, I'm showing Rosa's daily routine and also Pablo's daily routine. Remember, I told the students that I was going to tell them my routine and also my husband's routine. Why? Because the purpose of the story is to introduce the third person rule in the present perfect, in present simple, right? So I run every day, and then letting them find the difference when I say, for example, my husband runs every day, right? So that's how we can start the lesson, in this case, with context, okay? So what is mistake number 2? Do you remember what was the second element of the framework? What was the second element of the framework? Do you remember it? Ask. Catherine says ask. Great. Ask, not tell. Great. Thank you for participating. Yes, so telling instead of asking. That's mistake number 2. Okay, remember that the framework suggests ask, don't tell, right? So what's mistake number 2? Telling instead of asking. So after we introduce the topic, what we usually do, I have also done this. We show our students a chart, a grammar chart, right? Like this one, the one that we have here on the screen. So we have a chart, it has the present simple tense, we have the forms, right? We have affirmative, negative questions, and we also have examples. I think this chart I have used it. I think it illustrates the present simple in a very easy to follow way for students. So there's nothing wrong with the chart. However, when we read the chart for them, right, we're not teaching. We're not actually teaching. Yeah. Sometimes it's boring because it becomes a lecture for the students, right? And they get bored. Second, we don't know what they know. We don't know if they know what affirmative is. We don't know if they know the verbs. We don't know their prior knowledge, basically. And we don't know what they understood. After we imagine that we had our presentation, our grammar presentation, and we finished the presentation in 10 minutes. So we spoke for 10 minutes, and after that, we don't really know if our students got it or not, right? Because most of the time, we ask, right? I have done that as well. And we ask the students, do you understand? And what is the answer that we always receive? Yes, right? If we ask the students if they understood, yes, if they understood the grammar, they say yes, yes. Do you have a question? What do they say? No question, teacher. Yes, exactly. So when these are the typical questions that we ask them, right? Did you understand? All of them say yes, right? And if we ask them, do you have a question? Do you have any question? They say no, right? So we don't really know if they understood. Sometimes, well, most of the time, our students don't like to make questions, right? Because they are afraid of asking the question. They might think that their question is not relevant. So there are many reasons why our students do not make questions. So what can we do instead? We can have elicitation questions to activate prior knowledge, or we can ask concept checking questions to check understanding. These are also known as CCQs, okay? I don't know if you have previously worked with CCQs. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. All right, so what is the importance of eliciting? Asking helps you as a teacher understand what students already know. It helps learners become aware of their own knowledge gaps, because when you ask them questions and they don't know the answers, they become aware of this. Oh, this is something I don't know. This is something I need to know. Okay, so they may be more attentive in your presentation because they might be aware of this, right? It boosts engagement and participation, because if you are constantly asking questions to your students, then they will be attentive to your presentation, attentive to your explanation, because they know that at some point you will be asking them questions, right? And a tip is that, the tip that I have here is that we first need to ask, right, to involve all of them in the explanation in this phase of the class. And don't start by explaining everything. As I said before, reading every single thing we have in the chart. We can use the chart as a support, right? As a guide for us. Yes, there's nothing wrong with using the chart, but what I want to, what we have to do is, today, the message that I want to give to you today is that we can still use the chart, but in a different way. We're going to see a practical example in a minute. Okay, have a message in the chat. Okay, we have, with that technique, students participate, infer, and understand by themselves. Exactly, they can infer, yes. Thank you, Catherine, for sharing that. And understand by themselves, yes. They can discover the grammar rules by themselves as well. Okay, so how to achieve this? As we said before, elicit what students already know to activate prior knowledge. For example, at the beginning, we can start by asking, what time do you wake up? Okay, so with the response, we can know who knows, and who doesn't, right? Who understands the meaning of wake up, or who understands the structure that I have used, which is the simple present, a simple present question, right? So we can also write the responses, right? And also guide noticing, right? For example, if we write, he wakes up, we can start asking questions such as, why do we add S? Yeah. Another way to achieve or to do this, to encourage elicitation, to apply elicitation, is to use the CCQs, right? As I said before, they are concept checking questions, okay? These are questions that we ask on the go, right? While we are explaining, to confirm if students are understanding, or also if students understand the rules, if they understand the patterns, and they can do that by identifying and analyzing and studying the grammar chart by themselves, okay? So we can ask questions such as, is this about now or every day, right? To clarify that we use the simple present tense for repeated actions, right? Or actions that happen regularly. Does it happen once or many times? Do we use ing here? Okay, so this question to reinforce the form, right? So students can notice that, well, in the simple present tense, we don't use ing, okay? We use this specific rule. All right, we can also use guided discovery for form, as we have been saying, as we have said before. So we can give them examples or give them the chart that we saw before. And students can analyze these examples. I eat, he eats, we eat. And then we can ask them, right? What changes with he and she? So they can notice the difference with the third person singular, yeah? So students discover subject-verb agreement, right? This rule that we have in the simple present tense, right? That if we have with I, you, we, you, they, the verb goes without S, and he, she, it, the verb goes with S, okay? So remember the traditional way, right? So we are moving from this to this, okay? So as we said before, the traditional way to teach this would be by starting or by saying, good morning, students. Today we're going to learn the simple present tense. We use it to talk about routines and facts. For he, she, it, we add s to the verb. For example, I work, you work, but he works. Now copy these sentences and complete exercise 1. Now, obviously, this is a short version of what we actually do in the classroom, because obviously we take more time when we teach, but this is the process, okay? This is kind of the process that we usually follow. So when we move from this to eliciting and incorporating the students and involving them since the very beginning, your class will be like this. Okay, you ask the students, do you remember the previous activity in which I said my routine and also my husband's routine when I told my students my routine and my husband's? Okay, I also asked them to write down the sentences, the words, everything they remember from that story, right? So now I can ask my students, call some students, ask individual students to go to the board and write the structures that they noted from my routine and my husband's routine, right? And then after we have all of the sentences that they wrote down, then we can start eliciting the structure using guided questions, okay? For example, we can ask, what verb form do I use with I? What changes when I talk about he or she? In this case, what changes when I refer to my husband's routine? I have another question. Do all subjects follow the same pattern? Okay. Then, with these questions, we can have students notice the different patterns and begin forming rules. So for example, with I use the verb without S. With he, I use the verb with S, okay? And then once the pattern is clear, we can reinforce the rule by asking students to verify which subjects take S or ES at the end of the verb and which ones do not. And for this, we can use our chart, right? We can use our chart and we can ask students to study the grammar chart and answer specific questions. Obviously, I know this takes time because we need to prepare these questions in advance. We need to have these guided questions in such a way that students can analyze and come up with the rules by themselves, right? So I have some examples of questions that we can ask students. Number one is, look at the sentences. I speak and he speaks. What's different, right? So students go to this section, to this specific section, and they analyze. So what changes? What's different? They may come up with the following. They may say, oh, I can see that when I use I, the verb doesn't take doesn't take S. When I use he, the verb takes S, right? Another question could be, what word do we use to make a sentence negative with I, right? So we are moving to the negative structures, and students can go to this section and they can find that, all right, when I want to make a negative sentence, I have to use an auxiliary, which is don't, okay? And they can even realize that this word is known as an auxiliary, okay? Another question could be, what word do we use for he or she in negatives, right? And what happens to the main verb after doesn't? So as you can see, these two questions, right, lead the students to this analysis that for negatives we use, and with the third person we use doesn't. And what happens with the verb, right? The verb goes in the base form, right? So instead of telling students, this is the rule, when you use he, she, it, we use doesn't, and then the verb goes without modification, they can discover the rules by themselves with these questions that we prepared for them, okay? So in this case, we are asking, not telling them, right? Okay, and what was the last element of the framework? Remember, what was the last element of the framework? Did you forget or are you shy? Okay, meaningful practice. Thank you. Thank you, Maria Fernanda and Tiffany. Meaningful practice. Thank you. Yes. Meaningful practice. Thank you, Catherine. Yes. So the third element was meaningful practice. So what is mistake number 3, which is related to this? Not enough or bad practice, okay? So I always give my students this example. Imagine that I am not an English teacher and I am, my objective is to, or I am a driver. I'm going to teach them how to drive, right? I'm a driving instructions. I'm giving them driving lessons. So imagine that I teach you all the elements, all the car parts, right? This is the gear, right? This is and also the steps, right? After I teach you all the elements, then I teach you the steps, right? So first you have to put on your seatbelt, right? And everything. Then you have to press the clutch, okay? And I give you all the elements that you need. You know the concepts, you know all the parts, and you also know the process by heart. Do you think you will be able to get into a car and drive wherever you want to go? Do you think you will be ready to do that after one single explanation? Just show me with your reactions, thumbs up or thumbs down. Yes. Okay, thank you. No, right? We won't be able to drive just after, yes, just by receiving instructions, right? Or just by receiving one class? Yes, we need practice, exactly. So understanding is not the same as doing, right? So most of the time, after we explain to our students the grammar structure, we give them a worksheet, this worksheet, or we ask them to complete the exercises that they have on their books, right? Because they, when we have a grammar in the books, on their books, when they have a grammar explanation, it's often followed by an activity in which they have to complete gaps and stuff like that, right? And so this is basically what we do, right? After we give them a speech of 5 or 10 minutes, we ask them to complete a worksheet, and that's it. Yeah. So we really need to understand that our students need lots of practice. They need real tasks and not just drills. And we have to make these tasks meaningful, right? So our teaching needs to be supported by a lot of practice. I know that most of the time this is not possible because we have time constraints. Classes are or we have a 45-minute class, right? We don't have more periods of class to provide students with this practice, right? But we need to make an effort to make this happen. We know that even for us, teachers, it's difficult. It has been difficult for most of us to communicate in the language. After we have received instruction, we have received all the materials and everything, we have this difficulty when we have to speak, right? All right, so what's the importance of meaningful practice? We need to understand that language is a skill. We are teaching a language, and the purpose or the objective for them to learn this language is to use it, not just know it, right? We, as we usually say, we don't teach them to pass an exam, right? We teach them to use English in real life situations. So practice builds accuracy and fluency. Most of the mechanical exercises that we implement in our classes are not enough. We're not saying that these mechanical exercises are not correct or not okay, but we need to complement them with this extra communicative practice, okay? So how to achieve this? We can ask our students to work on controlled practice activities. For example, a very famous task that I know, activity that you may have implemented in your classes is find someone who, for example, right? In this activity, students have to ask questions so they complete a worksheet, right? So, for example, find someone who wakes up before 6 a.m. So students have to stand up and ask this question to their classmates, right? Until they get a name to complete this. We can also implement class service, and we can also implement verb sorting and sentence races, which is also something that works in the classroom very well. So we can ask the students to match subjects to correct verbs with or without S, right? And then have them write present simple sentences in teams, okay? We can also ask or have students to work on freer practice activities. For example, rinse and repeat. Yeah, we can have students describe their daily routine, then they listen, they revise, and then they tell a new partner their routine again, okay? We can have role plays. Yeah, we can ask students to ask and record, write down on a piece of paper, or we can give them a worksheet, a piece of paper for them to complete. How many students do certain activities? In this case, we are focusing on the simple present tense. So, for example, how many students walk to school? Jessica says, can you share the previous slide, please? Of course. This one, Jessica?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, my pleasure. All
Yep.
right. Okay. So as I was saying, role plays, dictogloss. I don't know if you have applied this in your classes. It's very funny. So students, well, the idea is that you give students a story on a piece of paper, and students have to, you divide the class into different teams. One student is going to be the reader and the speaker, and the other student is going to be the listener and the writer. So one student remains in his or her chair, and the other student goes to where the text is, right? Then the student who has access to the text has to read different chunks of the story, goes back to his or her classmates, and tells him or her what the text, what the story is about, sentence by sentence or phrase by phrase. This depends on how much students can memorize, right? Carlos says, I would like all the slides. Sure thing. I can share, we can find a way to share the slides with you guys at the end. All right, so then that's basically it. So it's funny because we are all competitive, and when we have students, when we ask the students to do this, they have a really good time. Okay. So as a conclusion, we have here the typical worksheet that most of us use, as I said before. After we introduce the grammar topic, we ask the students to complete a worksheet. We are not saying that worksheets are bad, or we're not going to use worksheets anymore because they do not foster communication. No, what we are saying is that we can complement this activity. So after our students complete the worksheet, we can move on to an information gap activity, okay? For example, this one, this is an information gap activity. So one student, we divide students into pairs. They have to define a role. One student is student A, and the other student is student B, right? We give this different pieces of paper to each of them, and the information, student A has some information that student B needs to complete his or her worksheet, and the other way around, right? So you have, if I am A and you are B, right? You have information that I need to complete my worksheet. What do I need to do? I need to ask you questions, right? I need to ask you questions to complete my worksheet. So in this case, well, in this sense, we are fostering communication, all right? As I usually tell my students, the purpose of this activity is not to complete it, to complete this worksheet. The idea is not to have it done fast. The idea is to use the language to complete the activity. Yeah, so I'm more interested not on the answers that you get, right? Because you can simply show the answers to each other, but I'm interested on having or listening to you, using the language, asking and answering questions, because sometimes students get really excited about filling in the words or completing the worksheet, and they start asking Spanish. Yeah, and that's what has happened to me at some points, right? So that's basically it. So if you feel that you don't know how to start planning your lessons, we can use some frameworks, right? We can find more information on the web. We have the PPP, the presentation, practice, and production. Obviously, this information is condensed in a nutshell, but on the web, you can find a lot of interesting resources, even the lesson plans, examples, formats on how to structure your lessons to this framework, okay? So these are the elements that we have in the PPP: warmer or lead in, the context, language presentation, controlled oral written practice, free oral written practice, and feedback. So all of the activities that we have been discussing can be adapted or inserted in this framework as well. We also have the TTT, which is the test, teach, test. So we start with a warmer, then we continue with a test to see or how much students know about the topic I'm going to present. Then we provide feedback. This is the stage in which we provide clarification, in which we actually teach the grammar. Then we have a second test. This is the control practice to see if learners understood, if they got what we taught. Okay, then we have freer practice, and then again we have feedback at the end. And finally, we have the TVL. Okay, we start with a warm-up, some preparation for the task. We instruct students in this task, they complete it, and there is a post-task work, which may involve correction, maybe in some of the weak areas that you noticed. And you can also, in this at this point, you can also include controlled or freer practice activities, okay, that I also show them to you before in the previous slides, okay? So what are the main takeaways of today's webinar? First of all, that communicative grammar teaching doesn't mean abandoning a structure. It doesn't mean that we are not teaching rules anymore. It means making grammar useful, purposeful, and alive in the classroom. So it requires us to change the way that we address our grammar lessons. For this, keep in mind the CAMP framework, okay? In order to achieve this, for the next time that you prepare your grammar lesson, please ask yourself, what's the context, okay? Or what would be the context for this specific grammar structure? Today we worked with a simple present tense, a very basic tense, but if you have to teach the present perfect, maybe the context would be experiences, right? Maybe asking your students or having a collage of the places that you have been to, the food that you have tried, right? And then showing your students a collage of that and starting your class by telling them, okay, today we're going to, or I'm going to tell you about my experiences. I've tried chontacuros in Puyo. Have you tried chontacuros, right? Start eliciting or giving students this context of the present perfect instead of saying, today we're going to learn the present perfect for experiences, right? So try to come up with something creative. Now we have AI, which can help us, is a valuable tool for us to come up with ideas. Sometimes we don't have ideas. We can use AI to have more thoughts on this, right? To brainstorm ideas. And the second question that you need to ask yourself is, how can I involve my students in discovering their role? This refers to what would be the guidance that I'm going to give my students. What would be the questions that I'm going to use for this specific structure? Okay, so you can involve them in discovering the rule. As I said before, we can use the charts, right? The grammar charts. I love grammar charts. For me, it's a very, they are a very useful way, easy to follow, easy to understand for my students. So from now on, we are not going to just read those grammar charts, but we're going to use them differently. We can use them, and from those charts, those specific charts, we can come up with the questions, okay, that are going to guide our students. And the last question is, how can I give them, my students, how can I give my students more opportunities to use the grammar I teach, right? So after we give them the worksheet, what would be a nice activity for them to practice the target language? Okay, so as I said before, present perfect. Now you're going to have a conversation about your recent experiences. So students can start interviewing. Have you ever tried sushi? Have you ever been to Spain? right? Or how many times have you been to this specific place, right? So as I said before, it takes time, but I'm pretty sure that you will be happy with the results that you will get after you apply these elements, okay? So that's it. Thank you everybody for being here today. If you have any questions, I'll be more than glad to help you with that.
Thanks, Rosie. I don't think that we have questions from the participants, but of course that the question that we always have is that they are always willing to see your presentation and everything. So just to let all the participants know that these webinars are being recorded. So if you need that, we can send the link for you to watch the webinar again and to see everything that Rosie was explaining today in our webinar. So thank you very much, Rosie. We really appreciate. So thank you for a successful webinar. On behalf of ECUATESOL, we extend our sincere thanks for your insightful and engaging presentation on teaching grammar communicatively. Your expertise and practical approach provided valuable perspectives and tools that will enrich the teaching practices of all who attended. I personally thank you because, teaching grammar for me sometimes is very difficult and make it engaging and making fun for the students to enjoy in the class as you teach and you show us some different techniques. It was really appreciated. So thank you very much. We also want to express our appreciation to all the participants who joined the webinar today. Thanks for dedicating these hours to be here for you to improve in your professional development. Don't forget, please, to register your attendance. I sent the link through the chat, so you can register. Don't forget to do that so you can receive your certificate. And your active engage and participation through the chat was better for making this webinar impactful. No? So thanks again for you contributing to the mission and the vision of ECUATESOL, which is to provide professional development for everyone. Thanks, Rosie, again. Hope to see you very soon in UNAE or here in Yachay or somewhere. So thank you very much for being part of ECUATESOL and for sharing. And for all the participants, good luck, and we will see you the next time in the next webinar session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, dear Daniel, and thank you all participants, my former students, my sister who is there. Love you. Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks, Kathy and Heidi, for being here as volunteers as well. So we hope to have all of you as volunteers at ECUATESOL. So thank you and have a lovely afternoon.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Please do not forget to register your attendance.